Government had set a minimum local content target of 75% by 2010 for all works and contracts to be undertaken in the oil and gas companies operating in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. I spoke to the leadership of the Content Development Board on how far this has been achieved. Hello there, welcome to Dateline Abuja. I am Omelogo Nadi. The Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board was established to increase indigenous participation in the oil and gas industry and build local capacity and competencies. This week's edition of the program looks at the journey so far. But first, let's listen to some of the outcomes of the just concluded Nigerian Oil and Gas Conference.
A critical take-home at the last year's edition of the Nigerian Oil and Gas Conference was the consensus that there was a need to pass the Petroleum Industry Bill. Having said that, this year we gathered again at this conference and that issue still subsists.
The PIB contains the most sweeping reform to be undertaken by government in relation to the petroleum revenue system in the last 4 decades, to create employment and business opportunities for Nigerians by encouraging investment in small oil and gas fields.
Government officials are concerned, industry experts are worried, our reserves are depleting, but yet we still get these assurances from members of parliament that the bill will be passed.
For Nigeria to continue to attract investment, it has to recognize it can't work in a vacuum. It's got to consider the outside opportunities relative to what they're offering the investors. So it's very, very important that that balance is looked at as well.
The commitment is there by legislators, and we are committed to ensuring that PIB will become a law, will become an act from us in these 7 Senate.
We know that as of now, investment is standstill because of this bill that has come in past. And so we are determined more than ever before to ensure that we pass this bill and let Nigeria move forward.
Another round of debate and discussion has ended as far as the Petroleum Industry Bill is concerned at this year's Nigerian Oil and Gas Conference. There's also a confusion over what should be in that bill according to the IOCs and what the government has prepared. But what should be of great interest and concern here is how that bill can be passed so we have a fiscal regime that will help this country attain its full potential in terms of oil and gas exploration.
Joining me now is the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, Engineer Ernest Wapa. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's start from here. It's nearly 4 years since President Goodluck Jonathan signed the Nigerian Content Act into law. In terms of percentage, how have you reduced the involvement of expatriates in the industry?
I think the issue of expatriate participation in the industry is something that we've been working on for a very long time in this country. And we are looking at the importance of having and continuing to see the industry as a global industry. Now, participation of expatriates is a concept that you cannot eliminate completely. But what this law has done is to kind of restrict expatriate utilization in areas where Nigerians don't have capacity. So, to give you the context, the first thing we had to do is to focus on capacity building. in fact, use the participation of expatriates in the industry to create more capacity of the locals, so that at the point where we are now, we are in a position to identify those expatriates that are really needed in Nigeria, and then use the instrumentality of the Act to create the legal basis for establishing those that we will give permits to work in Nigeria. And in terms of percentage, the law allows for 5% of expatriates to work in the oil companies.
5%?
5% of the management team in every company. And that number is to make sure that the company takes care of its investments, you know. But the way we are in this country right now, we are only able to retain about 15% on the average. Most of the oil operating companies have complied with that 5% range. But for some of the projects they do, they need to justify, or they have been able to justify in some areas where we need to give them expatriate quota to bring in people on the condition that those expatriates will have understudies that are Nigerians. But for regular service companies, the foreign multinational service companies, we are still having a major issue. And if you've been paying attention to the news lately, you will have seen that the board has taken some very serious action against some companies that prefer to continue using expatriates.
Yes, I'd like to write on that, because some oil and gas unions recently expressed concern that the oil and gas industry is still dominated by expatriates, and that has resulted in a sort of capital flight as some firms are moving to Ghana, for instance. So how exactly is the board tackling this issue?
Well, the board is doing quite a few things on checking expatriate utilization in Nigeria. Like I said before, we have a database now, and a growing database actually, of expatriates working in the industry. And the aim of that database is to categorize, to identify, and to track every single expatriate that is working in the oil and gas industry. The law requires that before the Ministry of Interior actually grants expatriate quota to expatriates, the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board must give the approval that yes, indeed these expatriates are required. It's a major source of capital flight, but it's being checked progressively and structurally. The danger with just shutting down expatriates completely is that you can impact production. That's why we've been very systematic. First of all, we have to study the trend, take note of the number of expatriates, receive the data from the oil companies and the service companies, and then begin to check the Nigerian capacities that are available. And that it's on that basis that we now decide which expatriates we can give recommendations to the Ministry of Interior for expatriate quota. And beyond that, we now do spot checks on work locations, because every expatriate is expected to carry a Nigerian content identity card clearing them to work in the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. So if my monitoring team, or if any monitoring team from the board goes to a work location and sees